there's a part in the new rite of Mass that a lot of people who like the Latin Mass don't really like. And that's the part where everybody shakes hands. The equivalent part in the extraordinary form of the Mass is actually quite beautiful if you ever get to see it. It's at a solemn Mass, and it's usually when you have a lot of priests and seminarians at the Mass. The best time to see this is at an ordination. So if you look at a video of an ordination, you get to see this. The deacon of the Mass will come up to the altar, and both he and the priest will kiss the altar. And then the priest will place his hands on the deacon's shoulders, and the deacon will place his hands on the priest's elbow. And theoretically, you're supposed to give a little headbutt, but they usually don't do the headbutt part. And the one says Pax Tecum, and the other one says Ecum Spiritu Tuo. And then the deacon will come down, and he will do the same thing to the subdeacon. And then the subdeacon will go to the head priest on either side. When the priests are in choir in the church, they have a specific order that they're supposed to be in, so that the priest on the gospel side closest to the tabernacle is the highest ranking priest for that particular ceremony. It might be the rector of the seminary, it might be the rector of the cathedral, it might be, I don't know, the oldest priest as far as ordination years go. And then the second oldest priest, or the second seniority priest, would be the closest to the tabernacle on the epistle side. And incidentally, the relics on the altar are also ranked in that same order, so that the highest ranking relic is the relic closest to the tabernacle on the gospel side, and the lowest ranking relic would be the one furthest from the tabernacle on the epistle side. At any rate, the subdeacon comes to this highest ranking priest, and he will do the same thing. Hands on the shoulders, Pax Tecum, and then that priest will turn around to the next priest, that priest will turn around to the next priest, and so on. You kind of see this wave of the peace of Christ going throughout the clergy. It's quite a beautiful sight to see. And that peace starts at the altar. When the priest kisses the altar, he's receiving the peace from Christ on the altar. He gives it to the deacon to the subdeacon to the highest ranking clerics on either side, and then so on. It just waves through the clergy so that all participate in this peace of Christ. Angels announced at Bethlehem that Christ was bringing peace on earth. And the way Christ brought peace on earth is, interesting enough, from that sign of contradiction that Simeon said he would be a sign of contradiction. The cross is the instrument by which Christ brought peace on earth. Now, we have a false notion of peace, very much the same way as we have a false notion of freedom. We think that freedom is that we can do whatever we want. True freedom is a liberty to follow the good of God, to find rest in God's goodness. And peace is not no battles and no wars and being able to do whatever you want, but rather peace is that rest that we find in God's goodness. Now, there are disturbances which we can have to that peace that we should have. There are disturbances from within, and there are disturbances from without. The disturbances from within have to do with our will not wanting to submit to God's will. what I want to do. And I'm trying to find what I want to do at all costs. And so you don't have peace. And then there are the consequences of my sins. I did whatever I wanted to do, and now, look at me, I am severed from that life of God. And now I have no peace in my soul. And then you have the multiple disturbances from without. The devil likes to ruin our peace. For example, the news. In the monastery, many, many years ago, we never listened to the news. Never. I mean, we found out when there was an earthquake because the ground was shaking. Somebody told us by a telephone call that there was a war in the Middle East. But beyond that, we had no idea what was going on in the outside world. We wouldn't have known if there was a coronavirus going on. We wouldn't have known that they had a new president. We wouldn't have known anything along any lines because we lived within the monastery. And the argument against this was, well, how do you know what to pray for? Well, it's very easy to know what to pray for. There's a world out there, and that world needs to get to heaven. So we are going to pray that God help that world get to heaven as best as possible. And that fits any category of news. We didn't need to know what the news was, what was going on, I don't know, somewhere in, Africa, in order to pray. And so we had no access to the news, and it gave us a level of peace which I have not found outside the monastery, because I've lived in a world that, one way or another is informed. I personally don't care too much for the news at all, but just being alive, you kind of hear it. Then there is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. A great example of fear, uncertainty, and doubt is the price of Bitcoin that just fluctuates on that. People are afraid. Oh no, the world is ending. I've got to wear a mask. I shouldn't say that. Broadcasted. Oops. Or this uncertainty. What's going to happen in the elections? What's going to happen with the economy? All these sorts of things destroy our sense of peace. Destroy our peace externally. The more absorbed we are in God, the less noise from without will bother us. And then the devil tries to steal our peace many different ways. For example, by curiosity. Now, curiosity is unnecessary knowledge. Knowledge is good. Knowledge to do with your state in life and your salvation is essential and necessary. You need to learn these things. But there's a lot of knowledge that's not necessary. Delving into knowledge that really is not necessary or really does not pertain to you is actually sinful. It's a sin of curiosity. For example, reading someone else's emails or mail. It really has nothing to do with you. It's their mail. It's a lack of privacy to read someone else's mail, and it's a sin of curiosity. Or delving into impurities out of curiosity, or delving into, different religions out of curiosity. It's unnecessary knowledge, and it's actually sinful, and it destroys your peace of soul. Another way that the devil destroys your peace of soul is by paying attention to the sins of others. Oh, I've got to fix everything in the world. I've got to fix everybody else's mistakes. I've got to tell them that they're wrong. And then you're focusing so much on all the evils. There is so much evil in the world that if you were to pay attention to evil, you would be able to last the rest of eternity without ever thinking about God, because you would just be obsessed with all the evils that there are in the world. And these evils, if they don't pertain to us, are unnecessary. Granted, yes, if your child is doing something very wrong, it is your obligation to know that, and it's your obligation to correct your child. But if, I don't know, some random person in Canada is doing something wrong, what does that matter to you? What difference does it make? How is that going to help you, I don't know, save your soul? Like, will it affect your salvation one way or another? Will God ask you, why did you do nothing about this random guy in Canada? Or will God ask you, yes, you are a holier person because of this random guy in Canada? No, neither one is going to happen. It's not going to affect your sanctification at all. And so why bother? Why destroy your peace of soul because of this? And another way to destroy our peace of soul, this usually happens with elderly people, is recalling past sins. You just confess your sins and you get out of the confessional and then you remember something from 50 years ago. Oh, I forgot to confess this. And so then you go back to confession the next day and you confess that sin and you get out of the confessional. Oh, I forgot to confess this. There will never be an end to this. Because maybe you confess them 2 or 3 times and you forget that you confessed them. But you keep confessing them because you think, oh, I've got to confess it. Any time that you go to confession and you leave that confessional knowing that you didn't hide a sin from the priest, all the sins of your past life are forgiven. There's no reason to destroy your peace of soul thinking, oh, I forgot to mention something. When you recall these sins from your past life, it is a good opportunity to do reparation. To say, okay, you know what? I'm going to skip lunch today because I did a really bad sin way back when I was, 5. And you do that act of reparation for it. If you remember it next time you go to confession, sure, yes, you can confess it. But it's not necessary to be afraid that you're going to go to hell because you forgot a sin from the past. It's not how it works. Yes, if you were hiding a sin for 50 years, yeah, you're going to go to hell. But if you forgot a sin, that's a different story. No, you will not be going to hell because of a sin that you forgot. So all these ways in which we can destroy that peace of soul. As I mentioned, Simeon said that this child would be a sign of contradiction. He dies on a cross, which is a sign of contradiction, the horizontal crossing the vertical. And it is by this sign of contradiction that we get peace in the world. Man, the horizontal, is reconciled with God, the vertical. Our sins have been washed away. Heaven has been reopened. We have another opportunity to get to heaven. We have found peace with God. There's a part of the Mass, it's called the fractioning and the mingling. The priest will fraction the host into 3 parts, and he'll take the third part, which is a little piece, and he will make 3 signs of the cross over the precious blood in the chalice. And as he makes these 3 signs of the cross, he says 3 things. Pax Domini, making that sign of the cross, the peace of the Lord. Sit semper, be always, again, the sign of the cross. And then vobiscum, with you all. And again, the sign of the cross. The cross of Christ brought peace to the world. Our personal crosses usually make us lose our peace. We get some strange disease, I don't know. We get both legs cut off or something. You're angry because you got both your legs cut off and you can't really get around that well. And you have no peace in your heart. It's not until you get to that point where you reconcile the fact that this is not that big of a cross compared to the cross that Christ carried, that you find peace in this cross. And it's a difficult path to get there. There's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of why, there's a lot of rejection of God almost, anger towards God. And then finally you realize there's a relationship between your cross and Simon of Cyrene. You have an opportunity to carry your cross with Christ, just as Christ bade his disciples, take up your cross and follow me. And now you have a cross, and so you're going to take it up and you're going to follow Christ. And at that point, you find peace. Pax Domini. You find peace in the Lord. As soon as you have found that peace, a weird thing happens. All of a sudden, you don't want to lose your cross anymore. You don't care that you don't have any legs anymore. Because if you lose that cross, then how are you going to follow Christ? You love your cross. You want your cross to be with you forever because you can follow Christ with this cross. And that you get to that second blessing. Sit semper. May it always be. And it's not until then that you come to the realization that you can take this cross and you can offer it up for others. And you get to that third blessing, the vobiscum. Pax Domini sit semper vobiscum.